What is that?
That's what we're gonna find out.
What is more interesting to you, the viewer? Discovering the solution behind a mystery or experiencing that mystery itself? Now, the structure of the classic mystery is tried and true. We are introduced to our main protagonist, and an initial question is raised. The meat of the story involves the detective discovering clues in his or her world, and creating a potential answer based on their findings.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are all aware that the repulsive murderer has himself been repulsively and perhaps deservedly murdered. How and why? Here is the simple answer.
I always hate when I figure out the ending of a mystery before the main character does, so for there to be a surprise or a twist at the end of the story, either the main character must know more or be smarter than the audience,
Mercury,
or something unexpected must happen.
No big surprise.
Detective!
You're looking for me.
Damon Lindelof, writer of Lost, Prometheus, and most recently The Leftovers, creates mysteries for the screen that don't follow the clear-cut formula that audiences would expect. They are disguised as other genres. It could be sci-fi, horror, or adventure, but that initial question is still central. To Damon, the question is always more intriguing than the answer. To fully understand this idea, let's go back to the TED Talk J.J. Abrams did in 2008.
We'd go to this magic store in New York City called Lou Tannen's Magic. So one of the things that I bought at the magic store was Tannen's Mystery Magic Box. Now, I was looking at this, it was in my office, and I was thinking, why have I not opened this? And I realized that I haven't opened it because it represents something important to me. It represents my grandfather. It represents infinite possibility. It represents hope. It represents potential.
This box is found everywhere in Lindelof's work. A gunslinger finds himself in the middle of the desert with a strange object attached to his arm. Survivors of a crash-landed flight discover unusual properties of the islands they inhabit. A mysterious world event causes a random 2% of the world's population to instantly vanish. But what if the writers starve the audience of clues or replace the solution at the end of the story with another question mark? Lindelof's approach to storytelling in this way has been polarizing, to say the least. The 10-time Emmy nominee has also been regarded as cinematic poison and someone who is not able to pull off any sort of satisfying conclusion. His projects, as well as their audience reception, can be examined so we can understand how narrative ambiguity can and should be used. First of all, Lindelof has a unique style. He is first and foremost a world builder. Almost every project he takes on is really high-concept sci-fi or low fantasy, which would normally require a lot of exposition. However, Lindelof prefers to leave things under-explained than over-explained, choosing to either reveal the rules of his worlds and the clues to his mysteries slowly or not at all.
There is no worse scene in the history of genre than the architect explaining to Neo everything that happened in the Matrix. So we have the architect, and then we have Lost. And the Lost is not enough, and the architect is too much. And somewhere in between is just right, and I'm gonna always be closer to Lost than I am to the architect, because that is just not interesting to me.
Right.
Whether or not you enjoy his elusive narratives, their setup tends to be pretty engaging and well-paced. If there is a lull in the story, or a hook is needed for the start of a new season, he can give us new information that we've been starving for.
Matt and your son are writing a gospel about me. Well, I'm not.
Jesus, I'm not saying you are, but, the beard looks good on you.
Lost, which aired for 6 seasons, relied on this, releasing exposition like a leaky faucet, keeping the curious on edge.
I'm alone now.
However, telling a story this way can be quite dangerous because of 2 reasons. First of all, there is the risk of the audience misinterpreting certain plot points or where the story is going. A lack of clarity can cause a viewer to come up with a totally different story in their heads than what the writer intended. The more ambitious Lost became in its last few seasons, less and less of the audience understood what was going on. Now, you could blame the audience for not paying close enough attention, or you could blame the writers for simply leaving the viewers in the dust. Another danger is that once everything is explained, some are left utterly disappointed. The box was opened, and the audience was not happy with what was inside. Many classic movies have a long-lasting legacy, not just because of their quality, but also because of their ambiguity. Was Deckard a replicant? What was in that briefcase? Well, I can tell you one thing. Most Star Wars fans hate knowing how the Force works.
I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
Because of how important it is, we should understand how ambiguity should be used in stories. First, it can be used to shift the detective role from the characters on screen to the viewer. This is probably the most common use for ambiguity. How deep the ambiguity runs is up to the filmmaker. It can range from an open ending like the final scene in Inception. It could be used throughout several different plot points like in The Fountain. Or the entirety of the piece can be up to interpretation, like the Tree of Life. The point is to ask the audience, what does this all mean to you? What is your solution to all of this? Some may find this approach to storytelling frustrating, while others may find it rewarding. A less common, but perhaps even more interesting use of ambiguity is to direct the main point of the story, to give clarity to the greater purpose of the narrative. A fine example of this is the ending of The Grey. If you want to avoid spoilers, you can skip to the time on screen. The Grey is a Liam Neeson movie that came out several years back and showcases exactly what I mean when an ending gives clarity to the greater purpose of the story. On the surface level, The Grey is a survival movie. John Otway and an oil drilling team are stranded in Alaska, threatened by vicious wolves in that territory. One by one, the members of the team are picked off by the wolves or other forces of nature before our hero is alone, face to face with a pack of wolves at the end of the movie. Not going out without a fight, Otway musters up the courage to face the wolves head on. But before the final battle, the movie ends, and Otway's fate is up in the air. Understandably, this would feel like a betrayal for some. But the uncertainty at the end of the movie made me realize that Otway's survival didn't matter to the main theme. Throughout the story, we are shown the final moments of several men's lives and how they either accept their deaths or die fighting for their lives.
Does it slide over you? You told Llewellyn back in the plane that it slides over you. Death. That it was warm.
We also understand that the acceptance, as well as the strength to fight, requires a great amount of courage. The movie opens with Otway about to commit suicide, and it wasn't until after the movie that I understood that Otway found a purpose for his life in trying to protect his comrades, even if he failed, before fighting for his life at the end of the last act.
Once more into the fray. Live and die.
The open ending brought clarity to the completion of Otway's character arc. The series finale of Lost is the same. Rather than receiving an incredibly in-depth explanation of the nature of the island, we were given an emotionally resonant resolution to the journeys of the show's characters. When writing the ending of a long-running TV show, an adaptation, or the next installment of a franchise, there was already a pre-existing audience, and therefore pre-existing expectations. Satisfying audiences that already exist requires knowing the fans inside out and a conscious effort not to deliver something that they don't want. The return of Ridley Scott to the popular sci-fi horror Alien franchise was highly anticipated, and fans of the previous movies were eager to see where the creator of the original would take the franchise next. Lindelof was the second writer to come onto the project and was asked to make a prequel that was loosely linked to the original movies, but his footprint is very clear on this project. When Prometheus released, many were disappointed and even outraged that it didn't live up to built-up expectations, having a lot to do with the marketing. Prometheus advertised that it would answer questions that audiences had about that universe, but it ended lacking payoff and created even more confusion and questions.
G'day, ladies and gentlemen. As we prepare to board our flight to Melbourne, please do so in a calm and orderly fashion.
Damon Lindelof's newest show, The Leftovers, which had its last season this year, had no pre-existing audience. It was a fresh start. The show was based several years after a mysterious event where 2% of the world's population vanishes. 140 million people instantly leave their friends and family. Not enough to cause society to collapse, but enough to deliver massive mental and emotional trauma to those left over. The show's characters try to cope with this immense tragedy in different ways, but the cause of the disappearance cannot be explained by science or religion. Now, right out of the gate, no promises are made about whether or not the cause of the sudden departure will be explained. I believe that ambiguity works best here.
So you know where they went? What happened?
It doesn't matter what happened. But the difference between you and me is that I accept that it did.
Kevin Garvey, the main character of the show's world, is turned upside down, and throughout the course of the 28 episodes, he embraces it more and more, as does the viewer.
I don't understand what's happening. Me neither.
Any precise explanation of the departure and other supernatural occurrences in the show would make the experience less valuable. Unlike Lost, the final episode was met with almost unified praise, and the series as a whole received critical acclaim. In a review for the final season of the series, Richard Scott Larson writes for Slant Magazine saying, "There are no real answers in The Leftovers, even as plot questions are resolved, and the series miraculously turns that ambiguity into its greatest accomplishment. With mysteries this intriguing, the box deserves to be closed. I don't want to know the answer."
The mystery box, in honor of my grandfather, stays closed. Thank you.
Everybody is wondering